All right, let's dive into something that might just flip your understanding of loans on its head. What if I told you that the loan you signed was never actually a debt to begin with? Today, we're going to unpack a pretty wild legal theory. It argues that the promissory note you sign isn't a promise to pay back money, but something else entirely. Something that actually settles the whole thing right then and there. I mean, really think about that for a second. The moment you sign for a loan, you feel that weight, right? The weight of debt. But what if that signature didn't create a problem for you to solve over the next 30 years? What if instead it created the solution, the very asset that paid for the whole thing instantly? I know, it sounds completely backward, but that is the core idea we're digging into today. So let's break this down. On the left, you've got the story we all know. You sign a piece of paper, the bank gives you money, and boom, you're in debt. Simple. But the argument we're looking at over on the right, it completely flips that script. It says your signature actually transforms that note into a valuable asset, a security. And get this, the bank then uses that asset to create the money they give you. It's like the whole thing pays for itself from the get-go. Okay, so how on earth is an argument like this even possible? Well, to understand it, we've got to go back in time, way back. We're talking about the Great Depression and a piece of emergency law that, and this is the key part, its supporters claim never actually went away. This timeline right here is the foundation of the whole thing. It all starts in 1933. FDR declares a national banking emergency, and Congress passes the Emergency Banking Act. Now jump forward 40 years to 1973. A Senate report actually points out that this state of emergency was never officially ended. See, the law had a specific off switch, a new presidential proclamation to terminate it. And according to this theory, that proclamation never came, meaning that 1933 law could still be on the books, legally speaking. All right, so let's just play along for a minute. Let's assume this 1933 law is still in effect. What does that actually mean for the piece of paper you sign when you get a loan? Well, this is where things get really interesting and the very definition of a promissory note gets completely upended. First, let's cover the basics, what we all think a promissory note is. It's basically an IOU, right? A simple contract. You promise to pay back the money with interest. For you, the signer, it's a liability, plain and simple. It's a debt hanging over your head. But if this argument holds, the Emergency Banking Act changes the game entirely. Suddenly, your note isn't just an IOU anymore. It becomes what's legally termed a statutory security. The law calls it eligible paper. And you can think of eligible paper as a kind of golden ticket for the bank, an asset they can take to the Federal Reserve and use as collateral to get brand new currency issued. And we're not talking about some fuzzy interpretation here. The argument points straight to the text of the law itself. Congress actually laid out a specific list of things that count as this eligible paper. And what's right there at the top of the list? Notes, plain as day. So the claim is, this isn't some judge's opinion. It's a direct definition from Congress itself. Okay, so if the note is an asset, how does the money part of this actually work? Well, it all comes down to a concept called an at-par exchange. Here's the step-by-step according to this theory. Step 1, you sign the note and hand it to the bank. Step 2, the bank doesn't treat it like a debt. Instead, they deposit it with the Fed as a security, an asset. Step 3, the Fed then issues brand new currency, backed by the value of your note. And now for the big finale, step 4, that new money is what you get as your loan. So in essence, your signature created the funds. The transaction settled itself right at the start. And this whole process is supposedly backed by federal law, specifically a section of the U.S. Code. The crucial part says that the collateral, that's your note, has to be worth at least the amount of new money being created. This is that at-par exchange we mentioned. It's a full value, dollar-for-dollar swap, your asset for their currency, not a loan where you're borrowing something you don't have. So what you have here is a legal showdown. It's a clash of two completely different ways of looking at the same piece of paper. You've got the standard way courts handle it versus this very specific, kind of obscure legal framework that we've been digging into. This table really lays it out. On one side, you have the Supreme Court's approach, this family resemblance test from a case called Reeves. Basically, judges look at a note and say, does it look like a consumer loan? And usually they say yes, so it's not a security. But on the other side, you've got what we could call the congressional family. This is based on that federal statute, the Emergency Banking Act, where Congress just flat out says that notes are securities in this context. It's a direct contradiction. And this leads us to the heart of the legal fight. It all boils down to a fundamental principle. When a general rule made by judges runs into a specific law written by Congress, the law from Congress is supposed to win. The whole argument here is that the 1933 Act is that specific, powerful law that should override the court's general test. Okay, let's recap the whole argument from start to finish. The Emergency Banking Act of 1933, still active. Your promissory note, it's not a debt, it's a security. That security is swapped dollar for new currency. This means your private signature just became a public asset backing the U.S. money supply. And the final takeaway from all this? The debt you thought you had was actually settled the moment you signed. So we'll leave you with this titchy one. We've walked through the mechanics of this pretty unconventional legal argument. Now, we're not here to say if it's right or wrong, but it definitely raises a pretty big question. What's the real power of a law that's still on the books, but is basically forgotten or ignored? It's a really fascinating question at the corner of history, finance, and the law. Thanks for diving in with us.